Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Cortazzo. He is from Baldwin Borough PD in Pennsylvania. He is the third vice president of the Pennsylvania Chief of Police Association, the chairman of a statewide mental health committee, and this is his 30th year in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Cortazzo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here.
Did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah, you're close.
Say it for
Cortazzo.
me. Cortazzo.
Cortazzo.
For anyone who's listening, I said this like four times offline. I was like, we're gonna get it right. So I apologize. Um, Cortazzo.
You got it.
All right, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Um,
Certainly.
After reading your intro, I felt like an underachiever. That is a great intro and bio, and I was hoping that anyone who doesn't know you, if you could give us a little bit more background into who you are.
Sure, absolutely. My name's Tony Cortazzo. I am the chief of police for the Baldwin Borough Police Department, which is located, it's a suburb of Pittsburgh. We're located just south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've been with this agency my entire career. It's a smaller agency. We have 24 sworn officers. I worked myself up through the ranks here. I started in patrol for the first few years. I became the juvenile officer, which meant I handled all of our juvenile investigations. I was appointed to the detective a short while after that position I held for about 15 years. And I've been in the chief role now for coming up on my 7 year anniversary. Everybody that's been here, the officers that got hired after me have already started retiring, and I'm still here. So I've seen a full overturn of the department in the years I've been here, and we have a good agency here, and I'm very fortunate to be here.
That's awesome. What do you think is the key to a long and successful career? You know, for you to be still here 30 years later, what is the secret?
I would venture to say that 99% of the people that became police officers, or any first responder for that matter, your firefighters or your paramedics, did it because they want to help people.
Mm.
So as long as you're still getting up in the morning, coming into work, and you still have that drive to help people and you're still being successful and you're helping people, then you keep coming back and you keep doing the job. So my
Yeah.
role has changed a little bit as a police chief, where my role is not so much helping the community on a day-to-day basis as my officers do. I look at my role now as the leader here is to help my officers and my staff develop their careers. So I'm still enjoying that role, and I still got some fuel left in the tank, so I'm still here.
It's really interesting because you said kind of in different words, but connecting to your why, like continuing to connect to that intrinsic motivator of, hey, I want to help people. And as long as every day, regardless of what's going on, you say, hey, I'm waking up and I'm going to do this because I want to help people. And now, as you are in a different role in this department, you are still helping people, but maybe in a different capacity.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, the leadership guru who's out there,
Yeah.
and start with why. So as long as you can start with why, and at times in your career you're going to redefine what why means, but as long as you have a why to get up in the morning, you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we get so entrenched in the stress or the day-to-day grind that we forget why we're doing this. And if you have that why, it's a guiding light for you to keep moving forward.
Yeah, let's be honest. This job beats you down. I
Mm,
mean, nobody calls 911 to tell us they're having a great day. Hey, we're having a great day. We just wanted you to know. People call us when they're having their one of their top two or three worst times in their lives is when they're picking up the phone to call us. So the officers that go out every day, and your firefighters and your paramedics that go out every day, are dealing with people at their worst and trying to help a little bit. So it wears you down. Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, I was just told the starfish story. Do you know this?
I do not.
So it's the story of this little boy walking down the beach, and there were a bunch of starfish that were washed up on the beach. And he's picking them up and he's tossing them back in the ocean. He's trying to save these starfish, but there's tons of them, thousands of them. And this man looks at him and he goes, "Hey kid, what are you doing?" And he's like, I'm saving the starfish." And he was like, "You're not going to be able to save them all." And he's like, "It's okay, just one at a time."
There you go.
And I really liked that a lot because sometimes we're hard on ourselves and we think that, maybe we aren't saving everyone or we aren't impacting everyone, but if you wake up every day saying, you know what, just one at a time. One at a time is well worth, the things that I have to go through to get there. I did want to ask you, you said that this job is tough and you've been in this career a long time. How has this career impacted your personal wellness over time?
It's affected it, especially back early in my career when I became the juvenile officer. The one of the roles of the juvenile officer here is to handle any juvenile investigation. And then when I moved in as the detective, I also handled the juvenile cases still. And those are the child abuse cases. And if you talk to any officer, the cases that hit the hardest are usually the ones that involve the elderly or the children.
Mm.
And I'm no different than anybody else. And I had some rough child abuse cases that I had to investigate throughout the year, that definitely take a toll on your psyche as time goes on, for sure. I've been on crime scenes, and let me back up. We live in a nice community. Like, we're not a crime riddled community. We have a nice bedroom community, um, well above the median income. Uh, Tremendous support from our community. It's always been that way for my entire career. We have a great relationship with the community. So this isn't like I'm out in the streets of some of these major urban areas where crime is real high. So even in a small town like mine, you still get the calls that will affect you over time, and it starts to wear away at you over time. And it causes, obviously, with the schedules, you miss family items, family events, birthdays, and holidays. But it also wears away on those relationships also, and it you have to recognize that, and the earlier you can recognize that in a career, the better chance for success you have in your home life, in your personal life, moving through your career.
Yeah. Do you think that there was anything specific that helped you to get through those hard times? Was there any sort of resource or activity that helped you to kind of, push through and keep going?
Yeah, yeah, I had to talk to professionals.
Mm,
And I've spent a small chunk of my career, I guess, as a detective years after it started wearing away at my day to day. I for a while I lost the why.
mm,
Why am I coming? Why am I doing this? We're like your starfish. This is one victim. I'm going to come in tomorrow and I'm going to have five more cases I got to deal with. Why? Like, what's the point of this? And it takes time to reflect and talk to people that can give advice like you gave, that one at a time is okay right now. It's sometimes you just got to keep your head above water until things settle down, and then you start pushing ahead again.
yeah. I appreciate that you said, yeah, like I had to go and seek resources from people who know maybe more than we do. And I think that we are as humans, regardless of what career you're in, but I think especially, you guys in law enforcement are so good at taking care of other people that you often forget to take care of yourselves. And I've done that in my life where it's just, how can I pour everything that I have into other people and into my career at my own detriment? And sometimes you do need to take that step back and say, what are the things that I have to do to work on me so that I can show up as the best version of myself for the people that I want to help? And it's almost like a reverse engineering. We
Sure.
don't realize that like if we're not sound physically and mentally, we can't show up for other people in the way that they deserve for us to show up for them.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, and I think that, sometimes there is still a little bit of stigma around talking to people and um it's been something that's really helped me. I think that we severely underestimate the power of conversation and communication and just being able to get things off your chest. Even if someone isn't giving you advice, sometimes just talking about stuff and not bottling it all up is all you need to kind of decompress. It's like that analogy of the balloon, where it's like you're just slowly letting out some of that air so that you don't pop one day.
Yeah, as first responders, as police officers, we're the helpers.
Mm,
And the mantra is helpers don't need help. Our job is to help people. We don't need the help. And
mm.
we have to find a way, the leaders out there, we have to find a way to start chipping away at that and say it's okay to ask for help or provide help for our people, because they deserve to have the best shot at a successful and happy life as payment for the work and service they're doing for their communities.
Mm. I like that you said, excuse me, I like that you said life. Because I think sometimes we talk so much about the career, which is important, and we talk about wellness in the career, but how can that extend beyond the career? How can we set you up so that you have wellness and, longevity in your life, not just your career?
That's a good question because one of the struggles that I have as a leader, uh, coming from a different generation of most of my officers, is the younger generation coming through now that we're seeing, we're hiring the officers that are in their mid 20s. They value different things than I valued, my generation valued. My generation, Gen X, it was, working long hours, you work for the same employer for your whole career, you have a pension to go to at the end. This new generation values their time off. They value that work-life balance. And as a leader, at first glance, you're like, well, hold on, that's not what we do here. But if you take a step back and you look, maybe the younger generation has that part figured out. And as leaders, we have to find a way to get them to that goal line.
Mm.
And I know me as an individual leader coming up being quote unquote the old guy when I'm dealing with my young officers and the issues they're having, as they come up day in and day out, I have to hit the pause button every once in a while and say, hey, you're dealing with the younger generation here. What are their perspectives on this situation? And we come up with a game plan from there.
Yeah. I laughed when you said, the quote unquote old guy, because it comes up quick. I felt I felt like I was always kind of the younger person, and now I walk into agencies and everyone calls me ma'am, and I don't think that it's out of respect. It used to be just like,
Sure.
out of respect. I think it's now because they genuinely see me as their elder. So it happens quick, but I appreciate you saying that because I've noticed this. Just, being a fly on the wall and having conversations with a lot of different leaders across the country is there's this conversation and it almost feels like a judgment, where it's like, yep, this younger generation, they don't have the work ethic. They just care more about their time off. And yet, the words of advice that every leader gives is focus on your home life, focus on your family, have interest outside of this career, don't make your entire identity this career. There's all these conversations about like, learn from us, don't do this. And if that is going to be the words of advice, then, maybe not having the same sort of judgments on, if that is a priority. But I also understand there's also a job to do and you have to show up and be able to do your job. So it's an interesting conversation. And I'm glad that you said that because I think that there's a little bit of like an internal battle that's going on with that topic right now.
Well, there's an external battle also because
Mm,
I come from one of the few professions when I meet somebody new, I'm introduced by the job that I do.
mm,
Nobody says, hey, this is Joe, he's a school teacher, or this is Sue, she's a nurse, but they say, hey, this is Tony, he's a cop. So we get introduced by our profession. But on the back half of that, if you ask and you would have a chance to interview pretty much any cop, tell me about you. Tell me a little bit about your life. One of the first things they're going to say is that they are a cop. We identify as that. Where their greatest triumphs in life are going to be that they're a spouse, they're a father, they're a mother, they're a siblings. They and very rarely is that our first answer. It's not, well, I have a great spouse, I have a great home life, I have tremendous kids, I like to do this. And then for my career, I also happen to be a police officer. We identify as cops. The public identifies us by cops. Um, and we have to try to shed that in order to let in help that we need so that we have that work-life balance.
yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever thought of it that way. But it's true. It's the title that you present yourself to the world with. Um, yeah, I think that's really interesting. I honestly think that what I do is the least interesting part of who I am. And I think that if you do focus on your life outside of your career, that can be true for everybody. That what you do is important, you love what you do, you think what you do is valuable, but maybe there are other pieces of you that are more valuable or more interesting to talk about. And it takes time and effort and awareness to be able to focus your time in those other areas of your life. I'm curious to know, throughout your career, you said that there were things that impacted you. You were able to seek out other resources that helped you. How did that impact how you show up now as a leader?
Well, that happened a long time ago, and I continued on with my career, and I was, as a detective, facing the point where I was burned out.
Mm,
And then an opportunity came for me. We had an opening at the chief's position, and a few of us put in for it internally and externally. And I was fortunate enough to come out of that where they appointed me as the chief, which gave me a rejuvenation in my career. It gave me a new why, if you will.
yeah.
Um, but as a leader, I had very little training. I was a detective, and we have one detective here. Well, we have two now, but back then I was the only detective. So I was a one-man show. I went out and did all the investigations, and now I'm tasked with leading an agency of 24, sworn. So I had to learn how to do that. And I took from the experiences that I had, and it took me a while to recognize that I was dealing with a lot of younger people that we were hiring. And I still haven't figured it out. I'm still solving those issues that come up day to day and developing myself as a leader, reading, watching podcasts, going to trainings to develop, to try to be the leader that I want to be for the people that I have here in the time that I have left. So I don't think there's, I guess the roundabout answer is, or the direct answer is, I don't think we ever get to a point where we have it all figured out. We have to keep developing ourselves and improving ourselves to be the best version of us.
I really, really loved that answer. I think there was a lot of humility in that answer of saying, I don't have it all figured out, but I'm working every day to improve myself as much as I can for everybody else. And it's not a destination
Yeah.
ever, and
It's
I
a
think
journey.
100%. And I think that if we limit ourselves when we think that we've arrived, like, and I think when I was younger, I had that mentality of like, oh, if I get here, I've arrived. And then you get to that point and you understand how much you don't know. And then you're like, okay, well, if I get to this point, then I've definitely arrived, and as you get older, you understand that there's no arriving, and the beauty of it is in that journey of
Sure.
growth. And we have to have that mentality of, how can I, even when things are going well, I think sometimes we think, we can only grow when we're new, or if maybe we're not the best at something, that's when we can grow. But I think that even when you've reached some of those high level milestones within your life and your career, you can still ask yourself that question, how can I be better?
When things are going bad and you're struggling, we learn and develop because we have no other choice. When things are going good and life is generally calm and day-to-day operations in the police department are going fine, that's when we can grow because we can. And
Mm,
that's the difference between the two.
not because you have to, but because you want to.
Yes.
Yeah, love it. So, organizationally, you talked to me about a few of the things that you are doing as far as wellness is concerned. And one of the things that stuck out, and I want you to, be the one that explains everything that you guys are doing, but you said that you don't call it officer wellness. You call it something else. What do you call it?
We call it staff wellness. We have 24 police officers. We have two office workers, an office manager and an administrative assistant, and we have one embedded social worker. And while the officers are out there every day facing the calls for service every day and working the investigations, the civilians we have here are also absorbing some of that secondary traumas also. So any of the programs that we do or that we try to do, we include everybody. It's a staff wellness initiative we have here, not an officer wellness initiative.
Do you think that by having a more inclusive title, that creates more of a culture of wellness and teamwork within the organization?
I hope that's the case. I hope if you interviewed any of my people, they would think that's the culture around here, then I'm doing my job right now.
Yeah. I think that we forget that a lot of times people just want to feel like they're seen and that they're valued in the work that they do. And when you have initiatives that are inclusive of everybody, it gives everyone that opportunity to feel like they're valued versus, well, these people get this, but these people don't.
I agree, and I'm hopeful that's the culture that we have around here.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing organizationally for wellness. I know that you explained some of the initiatives that you're rolling out in January. So if you could give our listeners a little bit of insight.
Sure. What we're doing now is we've had two opportunities to bring in financial uh, advisors to make available to the officers and to the staff that we have here that if they want some basic financial understanding on investments and saving for retirement and saving for kids' college someday. The joke around here, and I don't think it's just our department, is you could tell who my old or who my new officers are because they're the ones driving the $85,000 pickup trucks out back.
Yeah.
Um, I wish that I had somebody financially advising me when I was a 23-year-old brand new patrolman just to put a little bit of money away. I'd be a little higher on the hill than I am right now.
Yeah.
So financial planning, we brought in a specialist who deals with secondary trauma and gave a presentation to all the officers. It was mandatory for the officers. It was made available for the civilians if they wanted to come to talk about secondary trauma and how it affects your life at home and things that your family can be on the lookout for. We're hoping to get her back sometime in 2026 to do a program for spouses and family members of our officers. So we would have, family night here where the officers can come in with their kids, and we'll do face painting and order pizza where all the spouses and the family can go into the auditorium and hear this lecture. We started a voluntary fitness regiment right now that involves all the staff. It's voluntary. We do 5 categories. We do, I think, sit-ups, push-ups, 4 categories: sit-ups, push-ups, 300-meter run, and a mile-and-a-half run. We test twice a year. One of our sergeants who's big into the fitness runs that. We do it twice a year. And if the officers meet the times and the numbers that they need to, they earn comp time off. The younger generation values their time off more than they do any other rewards. We give them, if they hit all 4 of them, it's an extra day off that they could take whenever they want. So we've done things like that that are a work in progress. We send out our social worker sent out a survey to our officers and staff last summer on things that are important around here that we're not having. What are we missing?
Yeah.
Um, and the one that came up was facial hair. I'm old school. I don't like facial hair. I don't think it looks professional. But I had over half of my staff, the younger generation, that's a big deal for them. So that's one of the ones that, all right, well, if it's a big deal for you, then I'll learn to live with it.
Yeah.
So that's things that we have going on in real time that we've been working on. What we're starting here in January, and we're excited for this. We've been working on this for a little over a year and a half, coming up on 2 years, is that we have identified a provider around here, a mental health provider around here that specializes in first responders and veterans. And we are coming up with 13 call types, the most violent, most potential for secondary trauma. Um, 8 of them are mandatory for all staff. The other ones are elective that the officer can opt in or out of those type of calls. That if an officer has to appear on scene of one of those types of calls next year during 2026, the deputy chief or I will send a referral form to this organization, and within 72 hours, they will do an outreach call to that officer or staff member and ask if they're okay. Um, Give them some signs that they should look for. Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you on edge all of a sudden? Are you not getting restful sleep? Offer services that they can go back for if they want services, or give them resources if they don't want to go to that organization. They could go, here's other resources,
Yeah.
and then, or they can provide checkup. Um, we've talked about the stigma. We're the helpers. We don't ask for help. We're trying to remove that stigma. We're trying to take away the stigma where the officer and the social work and the office administration, where they have to seek out help because they've had a traumatic event that is bothering them. And we're hoping that by taking away that stigma, we can get a little deeper into them and give them some resources, especially for our younger officers early in their career when they're going on these traumatic scenes, where they are at least given resources that they can use if they want to.
Yeah.
And we're excited for this. We have community support. Our elected officials here that pass the budget and fund what we do are on board for this. It's been part of our budget discussions this fall. We're actually adding a line item to our budget that's called staff wellness. where we're going to dedicate money that'll be used for initiatives like this. And I don't know of many other agencies that are out there doing it, and we're very proud of this initiative, and we're excited to get it up and rolling here.
Thank you for sharing. There are a few things I definitely want to dissect in what you said. So,
Sure.
the first thing, financial wellness. I was kind of laughing because I also wish that when I was in my early 20s that someone was guiding me. I think the difference was that I wasn't making great money in my 20s. I think that saved me because I didn't have, money to spend on an $80,000 truck. But I was actually at a conference and they had a segment. It was a first responder conference. They had a segment on financial wellness and they made that joke. They were like, yeah, look out in the parking lot and everyone's got these brand new lifted trucks. And then after that, you have to have the boat that tow behind the truck and all the things. And I, at that time, was kind of newer in this space and didn't really know that. And I walked out into the parking lot and it was the same exact truck, stamp and repeat, probably 200 times, in this parking lot. And I was like, wow, it's actually a thing. It's not like something that, they're just making jokes about. It's actually a thing. And I do think that financial wellness is overlooked. It's something that is now coming to the forefront where there's more conversation and more resources that are being presented to all staff. And I do think that that bleeds into everything. If you are stressed financially, it's going to bleed into your home life. It's also going to require you to try to take other jobs or work overtime, which is going to add to your stress and add to your burnout. And it's this kind of cyclical thing. So I do appreciate that you guys are focusing on financial wellness. And you said it a few times throughout what you were explaining is this idea of proactiveness. How can you proactively get in front of people, especially when people are really young in the career? I think that a lot of stigma is also coming from this like tug and pull of a generation who didn't have those resources that are now being, said or told like, hey, you got to focus on this or hey, try this new thing. And when you're telling someone to try something new, sometimes there's a little bit of resistance. But if you start with the younger generation and that's normal, like, hey, like we are going to set you up for success right now. We are going to make sure that when you go on these difficult calls or these specific types of calls, you are required to do certain things. Then as they progress in their career, it's not going to be something that's like out of the norm. It's going to be something that is what they grew up with, and that's going to, I think, impact people long term, but it's going to take time to get there. I think there's just like this interesting like dynamic between a generation who never ever had it and a generation now who's always going to have it.
And I'll be long gone before we see if this is successful or not. So
I think we'll see. I think we'll see. Do you have another 5 years in you? I think we got
yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
I think we'll see that change in 5 years. I also really appreciate that you said you talk to your people and you understand one, what they're looking for, and two, what they're motivated by. When it comes to getting people to take advantage and to buy in to these things, I think they have to be things that matter to them. You could toss a bunch of stuff at them, and if they don't care about it, then they're never going to buy into it because they don't care. And so
Right.
for you to say, hey, what is important to you? And I was like, wow, because, I think that we forget that wellness is so multifaceted. It's not just working out. It's not just, talking to a mental health provider. It's not just financial. It is all of those things. There's lots of dimensions. But for you to say facial hair is a part of wellness, I agree. What can you do to make people feel like happier, on the job? And that's wellness. And so I thought that was a really interesting thing to add in there. And I know there was other agencies that had found that like people wanted to show off their tattoos or, whatever. And I know it's a conversation within every organization as to what's allowed and what's not. But to ask your people, hey, what would make this job easier, better for you? What would impact your wellness? And then how can we make that happen within, um, you know, the constraints of what we have? And if we do have constraints, how can we make that work long term? And to your point, adding line item things, or maybe just, softening up on your quote unquote old school mentality, to what you said, with allowing some of the things that maybe weren't allowed before.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a recruiting tool also because when I became back in the day, when I became a cop, we'd have 400 people taking a test for one or two positions.
Yeah,
Those numbers aren't out there anymore. Now we have two battles that the leaders face is one, we need to convince young people that this is an honorable career. We have to recruit people that want to be cops. And then number two is we have to recruit them to want to be cops in our communities.
yeah,
So we have to identify what the younger generation wants, what's important to them, and mold our agency that way so that when we do find somebody that wants to be a cop, they want to be a cop at our department and they want to come work here and invest their career here. And that's the back half of that is the recruitment angle of it. Of we're making the best possible situation for a young officer to come in here and set them up for a successful 25-year career so that you want to come here and you want to be part of our family and our team here.
It's really interesting. I'm actually in California right now, and the same conversation was kind of coming up of like, how do we attract new recruits? Because it's so competitive, right? Everyone is competing for the same pool of candidates. And one of the agencies that I work with recognized that there were a lot of other agencies who were like, hey, here are our training opportunities. Here are all of our, fancy gadgets and equipment and all the things, right? And they were like, because they're kind of smaller, I would say like smaller, mid-size, especially for, California. California agencies tend to be a little bit bigger, but they were like, you know what? We're going to focus on what we're doing to support their wellness because a lot of the younger people that were coming in were asking those questions of like, okay, well, do you have a wellness program? Or, what are you going to do to support me in my life, in my wellness, in my longevity? And so there was this hiring fair and a lot of different agencies there. And they're like, we're just going to focus on our wellness program. That's it. We're going to say, these are the things that we're doing to support you and your family and your wellness. They had a line wrapped around the block because they were like focusing on that. And that's what those young people found to be valuable and important. And it was really successful. All the other agencies that were focusing on maybe some of the like tech stuff and, they didn't have the same turnout as the agency that was focusing on wellness.
That's good. Great to hear.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
But
Yes.
I think it's to your point,
Yeah.
how do you speak to them in a way that matters to them?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you could, like we said, you could throw the whole kitchen sink at them, and if they don't value that kitchen sink, they're not going to use it.
Right.
So, yeah. One of the things that we talked about earlier was stigma. How do you break it? It's a $1 million question that everyone's asking. How do we break stigma?
Well, I hope this new initiative we're doing next year breaks the stigma. They get the phone call. They don't have to take that step
Yeah.
because the stigma is, as we said, we're the helpers. We don't need help. That's a big wall to cross to have officers reach out. If an officer's reaching out for help, they are probably too far gone to salvage their career. When they're reaching out for help, they've hit rock bottom.
Mm.
And that's way too long after the fact of when we need to be helping out our first responders and our police officers. So if we can devise anything we want that still puts it where the officer has to reach out for help, and I believe that it will fail. So we're hoping this new initiative takes away that where we have a third party privacy. We don't find out anything they talk about, reaches out to the officer, and we're hoping that we can bridge that stigma that way, is what we're
Yeah.
going to try to do.
Yeah. More of an early detection, proactive approach of, hey, no matter what, if you go on this call, we're going to reach out to you and we're going to talk to you. And it's more of, I like to call it more of a push than a pull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish there was a study, and perhaps there is, and it's people smarter than me, but when you become a police officer, you go through a psychological evaluation to make sure you're psychologically fit to perform the job.
Mhm.
and every cop that gets hired has passed this test. There has to be a study somewhere that shows that if you go on these types of calls, that it's going to affect you unless psychologically you're too far out that it doesn't bother you. But all the officers that we have are passing these psychological exams. So I would draw the conclusion or make the hypothesis that just by simply being on scene of those, it's going to cause you problems in your life at some point. Maybe not tomorrow, and maybe it's repeatedly seeing these types of calls over a span of a 20-year career where it's going to weigh away at or weigh on your mind. Um, so we have to start it early in a career.
Yeah.
Now, my older officers here, the ones that are within 5 years of retiring, they're participating also because it's never too late to be proactive, I
Yeah.
don't think. And time will tell if this is a hurdle to start reducing that stigma,
Yeah.
and we'll see. Have me back in 5 years. I'll let you know how it's going.
I'll actually take you up on that. You know, I had this conversation recently where you know, we were talking about proactive wellness and you know, there are a lot of people who are like, I'm good, you know, and a lot of the younger generation, I think, kind of have this mentality of like, yeah, like I'm good. I don't have any injuries yet. I don't have any pain yet. You know, maybe I haven't seen a lot of traumatic calls, you know, and I feel good. And there's this mentality of, and therefore I don't need it. And I think that the conversation should be good. We want to keep you there. So it's even more important to put in place these things
Yeah,
because we don't want you to reach a point where now you're like, oh no, you know, I let it go too long and now my whole life is falling apart. You know, so if someone is saying, I'm good, good, great, we're going to keep you
yeah,
there. And here
yeah.
are the things we're going to do to keep you there. You know, it doesn't mean that you get to opt out. It's like we're going to, you know, be even more proactive in making sure that we keep you there. And so I like that
If
you
you go
said
on
it.
that call, if you go on that call again tomorrow, you're going to get another phone call. We're going to check in with you again.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I like that you said it's never too late because the reality is that there's a whole nother chapter after your career. You know, it's
yeah.
not just how can we get you to the end of your career, it's how can we get you to the end of your life in a successful way. And we want that time after retirement to be as long as possible. But I'm going to add to that because it's not long just to be long, it's long and you're thriving, you know, like, and you have your health and wellness intact, you know, because there was something I read recently that was talking about longevity, and it was saying it's not longevity for the sake of length of time, it's longevity with the sake of being actually well. And I think we forget that, you know, no one
Sure.
wants to have a long retirement if you can't enjoy it.
As police officers, we are not paid as much as private sector
Mhm.
professions are.
Mhm.
But the benefit to being a cop is that generally you get to retire when you're 50 or 55, depending on what contract and what agency you're with. So we have the benefit of retiring at what is considered an early age in today's world. What's the point of it if you're not financially sound and mental health? You have the mental health balance, and you have a great family life, and you enjoy your spouse and you enjoy your kids watching them grow. What's the point of retiring early if you're not going to take care of yourself in your career and set yourself up so that when you do get to retire early, you have an opportunity to have a quality retirement life, however long that is. And again, hoping, you retire 50, 55, maybe that's 20, 25 years of good quality time that you've set yourself up by giving service back to your community when you were young in your career. And
100%.
that should be the ultimate goal of every police leader out there, is to get your staff in that position.
100%. It does bring me kind of to my next question. This is going to be a two-parter.
Okay.
What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's younger in their career? You know, maybe something you wish you would have known earlier, or something that's helped you along the way. And then what words of wisdom would you share with other leaders in the context of wellness?
Hmm. All right. For the young officers out there or young firefighters or young paramedics, if you're young and you're in this career, if you're a first responder, young in your career, my words of advice would be that the ultimate goal of your wellness is your responsibility. If you are fortunate enough to work for an organization where the leadership identifies that that is important and they're bringing in um, all these different tools for you, take advantage of them. We do financial wellness here, 24 officers, 3 civilian staff, and maybe we get 5 or 6 show up only. The room should be full. So it's your responsibility as a young first responder to take care of your own mental health and your own wellness from day one. If you work for an agency that does not have leadership that buys in, there are plenty of resources for you to go out on your own, on your off time, and find financial wellness. Take care of yourself, physically fit. Find a mental health resource that you can check in with from time to time. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I can lead my officers and my staff to the edge of the water, but I can't make them drink it. So
Yeah.
that's my advice to the younger generation out there is it's your responsibility. Take advantage of it early. I wish I had.
Yeah. And
And
you're,
the second part was what? The leaders out there listening to this?
yeah.
My advice to the leaders would be that as leaders of any organization, first responder or otherwise, leaders of your household, your parents, you're the leader of your house. Any leader, we make decisions every day. Some days, hundreds of decisions. Most of those are very minor. It doesn't make a bit of difference. Every once in a while, we got to make a big decision. But on pretty much every decision we make, there is a human element to it or a human factor to it. And as leaders, if we can at least keep that somewhere rattling around in our brain of to pay attention to that human factor that is a variable in this decision we have to make, I think that makes us a better leader. And we don't always have to go with making decision based solely on the human element of it, because I might have a decision of, I have to force somebody to stay over. Um, so who's it going to be? Well, I'm going to affect the human factor on either side, but always consider that human factor before you make your decision and let that be one of the variables. And that would be my advice. I try to do that, and that would be my advice to fellow leaders out there.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your insights, what you're doing organizationally, and your words of wisdom. So thank you.
I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much.
Of course.